Well, greetings everyone, and welcome once again to another Monday session of To an Imperfect Union. Um, Strangely enough, we are going to be starting in 2 days Black History Month. I don't know whether that flies in the state of Florida or not, but yeah. Um, and also, I had said earlier this year that I wanted to talk about more positive subjects. We were going to talk about political issues as far as voting, the difference with the Republican majority in charge, who's going to run in 2024. And I was not going to talk about police reform, police killing black people. This was supposed to be a positive year. And then lo and behold, it happens again. Now, maybe it's because once again, I'm going to blame this on aging, the aging factor. Maybe it's because I was a much younger man when the Rodney King incident took place. And I really thought at that particular time that the most asinine statement that was made during that whole damn incident was Rodney King saying, "Can't we all get along?" Because it's evident evidently since at least the end of the Civil War, no, we have not been able to get along. That's just my humble opinion. But I see Bill Carroll is down here in the queue, and I don't want to waste all of his time. So let me bring Bill up here in the queue. Bill, how are you doing this evening?
It's been a very strange day. Um, not the best of days. I guess maybe not the worst either, but it's only a very strange day. And obviously, uh, preparing for the show, forcing myself to watch the video, feeling like you're on this treadmill, going. And we mentioned this, right? You mentioned the Rodney King beating, and of course, there have been incidents like that one, like the one we're now talking about, that stretch back hundreds of years. And, you know, there's this cycle of discovery, outrage, demands for reform or change or uh, defunding or whatever it is, right? And then the outrage dies down, then a new horrible thing happens, and wash, repeat, rinse. So we do have this problem, right? We do have this issue that has shown that it's incalcitrant. It's not going anyplace. It's not going to be reformed. It's not going to be moved forward. And despite the hopes and prayers and wishes and whatever's of loads of different people, we always end up coming back to the fact that at the end of the day, we funnel more money, not less, into policing and increasingly aggressive policing, right? Uh, Increasingly armored police forces with increasing resources that tend towards lethality and little to no time, attention, or effort being put on anything that de escalates or de emphasizes lethal force. So, we've talked about this before. There are countries where 95% of their police force aren't even armed, at least not with a firearm, right? They may have a, you know, tonfa, right? Which is,
A baton.
right, like a baton, but has the handle on it so you can
Yeah.
swing it up. Or sometimes even the good old fashioned nightstick. Sometimes the sort of whippier one, the sort of telescoping. But
Yeah.
like the old Springbok they used to have in South
Pepper
Africa.
spray. Some countries still use pepper spray and different. I understand that also. Yeah.
Right. Well, the point is that there's a lot of places where non-lethality is the norm in policing, right? So it's easy for Americans to think that America is normal, and it's not. It is, in fact, the opposite, at least amongst major industrialized nations. There are places in the world where people have police involved shootings every few years, not every few hours or every few days. There are nations where it happens every few years. And of course, this wasn't a shooting. This was, some might say, worse, certainly not better. And, you have all of these problems, all of these situations, all of these things that keep arising. And people bring up training, and people bring up, oh, we should have a social worker in the patrol car with them, or we should have a psychologist or a psychiatrist or both or whatever. And while some of those things are not terrible ideas, the real root of the issue is the dehumanization of Black people. And until you fix that part of it, none of the other stuff will matter. Like you can put wallpaper over a hole in your house, James, but it doesn't truly fix the hole. You just can't see it, at least until something pokes a hole. And now there's the hole back again. And that's what's happened with all the quote unquote reform measures in the past. It's not a lack of training, though there are some places where they put more emphasis on training before they ever hit the streets than we do here. And particularly with some sheriff's deputies that, once again, not here to cast any shade, but some of those are like a shake and bake, right? Where they teach them basically the very basics and then boom, put them out on the street. But in most big cities, there's fairly extensive training. I'm in Chicago. The training here is pretty extensive. They have a formal academy that goes on for several weeks, and there's psychological evaluations. You have to have at least 60 hours worth of college level credits to even get into the police academy. Bunch of stuff, right?
Bill. Training. Come on, we know what. Come on, I mean, training. You can be the best trained individual in the world, but if you don't have that particular, what should I call it? If just because you're trained, as we know, does not necessarily mean that your training is being put to the proper use. For example, I believe it was earlier in 2000 when they were talking about gang members joining the military in order to get the training to bring it back to the streets in order to, so forth and so on. But I see Mr. Scott is in the queue. Mr. Scott, how are you doing this evening?
Good. Greetings, gentlemen. I was just listening to Bill as he's always so eloquent. I wish I could be so eloquent. But what I do want to say though about training, it's what are you actually trained to do? And so this is the thing. I with Black History Month, which to me it's every day, but I've been Black all my life, and every day I'm Black. So, but I get a lot of work and I get a lot of things to do during this month, and I'm working on a project which made me go through some of one of Dad's books. And he had a lot of law enforcement people, a lot of head of the fire department in St. Paul, chief, assistant chiefs in St. Paul, judges, some of the attorneys, some of the legislators, politicians in this one section of the book. But when I looked at their backgrounds, these people had stellar backgrounds. I mean, almost to a person, they had stellar backgrounds, but not only that, they contributed to the community. They were involved in the NAACP. They were involved in the Urban League. They were secretary of this. They were involved in things in their community, as opposed to, here they have their families, they're doing their work, but at the same time, they're still involved in our community. And in those times here in the Twin Cities, there was a very small Black population. And I look at the numbers of people that were involved on so many levels, and I'm looking at the research of my dad's work and the books that have been chronicled and documented. And then I see these officers in Memphis, which is a city, I think it's 65% Black. I think the police force is certainly almost the same, 60% Blacks on the police force.
I think that the percentage in the police force is a little less, but
it's over 50. It's over 50%.
Yeah, it's definitely over 50.
Yeah, and so then that makes me wonder, because I've looked back when I was working at Child Protection, I would look at cities like Jackson, Mississippi, where you have 70% Blacks, and I'm wondering, are they running their things the way? I mean, does color and race and those things don't matter? They're still taking kids out of the home. They're still crying. Are they beating Black people? And I looked at some of the statistics, and it was very, very, very real. I'm not an analytics, and I don't want to delve into the Bill Carroll analytic area. I want to stay clear of that. I want to really steer into what I see and what things appear to be in front of me. And in those cities, they seem to have the same type of numbers as you see in regular. But what seems to happen in a lot of those southern cities is they're totally underfunded. Their infrastructures are terrible, as we've seen. They don't even water.
Who's underfunded? The police? Are you saying that the police in these areas are
I'm saying that these cities and these people that live in these cities that don't have clean water, they don't have an infrastructure that seems to, their tax dollars don't seem to go for their needs. That seems it just again it's you can always bring these things back to me, the racism.
But okay, now, Mr. Scott, I got to ask you this, because one of the things you always point out when you talk about George Floyd is the fact that he wasn't from Minneapolis. So does this make Tyree's murder more heinous because he's from Memphis?
I don't know if I understand that question.
Okay. Yeah, well, okay. Let me get real blunt with it.
I mean, all murders are heinous.
Wait a minute, hold it. You have specifically stated on many occasions that the reason why you do not support or talk about George Floyd, and that is, or you don't consider him as a quote unquote hero, is because he was not even from your city. This young man was 150 yards from his mother's house. So I'm asking you, is it more heinous for a Black visitor to be murdered in your town, or for a resident to be murdered in your town? Should we be making that kind of difference between Black victims?
No, no, that's not what I said at all. Plus those two things are apples and oranges of
Oh,
situation.
how? I got to know that because we're talking
Well,
about the
if
police
you let me
department.
finish, I
Okay.
would say
Okay.
all I was saying about George Floyd is obviously that's awful. I mean, we saw that the trauma. I mean, it goes without saying. But I'm saying to say to make this some type of what they want to do with the area is make it like
A
what do you want?
memorial. A memorial.
Well, one of the things a memorial, which I understand, but also we have people that come and take pictures, and they come and it's almost like I think there should be an honorable memorial to what happened to let us know that this happened here, and we don't want this to happen in our area. We don't want this anymore. It has nothing to do. It could have been my next door neighbor, somebody I grew up with. The same thing. It's terrible. All these police killings are. There's nothing that I hate that you see it that way, but I don't.
Well,
Um,
now,
Again, okay, so they want to put here in Minneapolis just an example because there have been brothers killed. I was in St. Louis during the Michael Brown thing. I happened to be there during that. And so here, that area right now is total blight. It's total people are hanging out. They're doing everything you can think of there, and the police don't even come there anymore. So I mean, it's a different type of a situation when you live in it, and you see the effect that this has happened to the city here because they can't figure out how to respond to these things. Our politicians, our city councils, they can't figure out how do we respond. I'm not going to sit here and say that I know what's the right way to do this or what's the wrong way to do it because I don't. But I'm just saying, if we have all these people, why can't we come up with some way of changing these things? You know, back in 1968 or so, here in Minneapolis, they had something like a Scorpio, or what do they call that thing? Scorpion group? Is that what it was called in
yeah,
Memphis?
Yep.
yeah.
Scorpio.
They had that here. They had a thing where they were doing that same type of a thing here. And I think and as we saw with Amir Locke, we saw going in no knock warrants. We've just seen a continual barrage. But again, what gets me with the Memphis is these black officers. I mean, I didn't see their behavior. I didn't see any empathy. And I was really glad to see now that they brought some more officers in because when I watched the tapes again, I did see a white officer, and it looked like one of the white officers tased the young man. And I'm like, okay, you went rush to judgment on these 5 individuals. Well, what? None of the responders did anything. They got there, they didn't say
Yeah.
what's happening, what's going on, and do their jobs to offer aid to. That's why they were called to come there,
Yeah.
even though they were called late. They were called late in the game to do it. So
Yeah, we're going to talk about the EMS response also, but
yeah,
also I want to talk about I think a fallacy that was put forth by my generation that has actually been kind of passed down and accepted as truth to future generations, and I think I can relate it to what happened when you talk about these police officers. Because in my day, the thing was, hey, we need the police to look more like us. Well, just because they look like us doesn't mean, what they say. How did they say it? All skin folk ain't kin folk. So just putting a black face in a blue uniform does not, as we just saw, solve the problem. It seems, and this has gone on for generations also. I can probably point out 1 or 2 guys, black officers in my neighborhood. Although the most of them, we got along with real well. They lived within the community, as you said. Uh, Mr. Scott, might run across, a bunch of us kids together at church. Everybody went to church in the same, and so forth and so on. But like I said, the premise being, the more police that look like us, supposedly the better relationships that we have had with the police. And like I said, I'm blaming this on my generation because I think that's where it started at. But Mr. Scott, when you look at those 5 officers, 5 black officers attacking a young black man, and let's start from the way they pulled him out of the car. Let's start there. Okay. From that point on, Trye was a dead man. So, Mr. Scott, if having officers that look like us in our neighborhood is not the answer, is it part of the problem?
Well, I don't know how to respond to that other than it used to be, as you just said yourself, we knew the officers. We it used to be different. And I don't know how we got to a point where 5 officers, and again, on this stop, I didn't see anything about the officers going up to him and saying, "Do you know why we stopped you? Do you have any kind of conversation? Do you have your license or say anything
Name and
about why you were
registration.
stopped?" There was not. They just pulled him out of the car. They didn't say, there was no conversation. And we've had discussions about this. These SWAT or whatever teams, that they have a mindset. And it's almost like when I look at that, there's supposed to be some super squad that looks at drugs and serious crime. It looks like, well, this was a slow day, so they just pulled the brother over because they didn't have anything to do that day, and this is what we do. So, boom, and he's asking, "What did I do?" Let's say, just tell me why did you stop me? There was none of that. There was none of that there. So, it's historically, I mean, we know why police was started, to keep us intact, and slave catchers and all. And it's almost like this mentality, it seems like it continues to permeate these police forces. I mean, we have police forces in every city here. I mean, so it's pretty hard to comment on everyone on one situation. But in looking at this, it looks like, why would these black men beat this young person that has really no threat to them? I mean, there's nothing he can do to hurt them. There's 5 of them. They're armed. It's the mentality. It's the mentality that these special SWAT or whatever these teams are, we're seen as some type of supersonic threat, apparently, no matter what size you are, no matter what threat we look like. It just seems like these things are happening. And their responses has been defund the police. We need to have social workers. We need to have, we need all of these things, but we need everything in a proper context.
Right. And remember, as I've said, when I say defund the police, I'm talking about take these militarized weapons out of their hand.
It's a good start.
I don't care if you want to put some more officers on foot patrol, if you want to put some more officers on bikes, stuff like that, but I don't think you need an armored car or the SWAT team needs another 50 cal. Bill, what's your thoughts on that? Wake up, Bill. I see you going. You're nodding off on me. What's your thoughts on it?
I heard you. We have 2 trains running, right? A historical train that dates back to 1838 when they founded in Boston the first quote-unquote modern police force. And then this thing that happens in 1968 when, with all the other things that Lyndon Baines Johnson had on his plate, he somehow finds space, time, whatever, to throw the first, the first war on crime. Remember the war on crime? And that all that stuff you talked about, where there was a certain amount of cohesion and unity, at least to a certain extent, between officers and the people they policed. And that broke down, right? So even in the 1830s, there was a certain amount of it breakdown because a lot of the people they were policing were recent immigrants from Southern Europe, Eastern Europe, and of course, Ireland, right? That was the main reason Boston, the real reason that Boston decided that they needed a modern police force was this influx of Irish immigrants. Ironically, it was the Irish immigrants who were being brutalized by the police at first. But those things changed, at least for them. The difference for us is that we're locked in this eternal cycle where we are always other, right? We never get to be the home team or whatever. Even when our police look like us, when they live in our neighborhoods, and usually even when they look as though they don't live, but sometimes they do live in our neighborhoods, all that other stuff, once again, they quickly begin to think of other Black people as the same way their white counterparts think of Black people. Suspects, the bane of their existence, bullet bags, right? Target practice. All those things you hear people throw around. Gorillas in the mist. So
a slow day.
Yeah.
I like that, Mr. Scott. It was just a slow day. A slow day.
Right. And
I know it's not funny, but I mean,
an analogy, yes.
Right, you laugh at me from crying. And so by the time we get, like I said, the late 1960s, you've got rebellions, which they called riots, popping up in almost every major city in the United States as Black people have had enough. And police go in to raid things like blind pigs, or go in to enforce a broken taillight, and it escalates very quickly to people being beaten and shot and hosed down and whatever. So a very famous example, of course, is once again Detroit 1967. We talked about training. The reason that didn't just go down with them just whipping heads is that a bunch of the guys who were in that self-same blind pig were recently returned, in fact, two recently returned Black Vietnam War veterans who were celebrating their return home. And they weren't going for it, James. They decided they were.
I was there. You don't have to tell me. I was there. I was actually in Detroit. They took machine guns off the National Guard.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Correct. Right.
But also very strangely, those same blocks that were burned that you're talking about in 1967 are still empty today. But that's another question, another story. But go ahead, Bill.
Well, and the places where they aren't empty is they're being picked up by speculators. But we'll get to that once again. About how certain people benefit while other people are destroyed by these cycles. And so what happens is eventually, right, as you said, the National Guard, all this stuff happens. And people are like, oh, what shall we ever do, right? That's always what happens. At some point, people clasp their hands together and grasp their pearls and wring their hands and whatever and say, oh, whatever shall we do? And the answer is always more, bigger. So some reason they don't say, oh, well, the problem is the police were too aggressive in the first place. We need to dial that back. No, the answer is always more aggression, more, bigger, faster, funnier. And we get to this point now where we have these elite, right, groups. Now, these guys don't look that elite to me. I mean, see how winded they were? I'm not trying to be mean, but when I was in my prime,
you're being kind. You're being very kind.
But I mean, I'm not trying to be mean, but when I was in my prime, even with full battle rattle on, even with maybe 400 plus rounds of ammo on me, and everything you could think of, Kevlar, all that, I could have run as far as they ran and not be breathing like that. I I hate to once again, I hate to say this, but I really believe that some of that stuff is because those guys were just mad because they had to run.
We could do mandatory 12-mile hikes. Okay.
I'm just, I mean, this is the elite squad. So these guys chased this dude for a few blocks. And I think that's part of why, I mean, part of what happened. They don't like running. So when they caught him, you know, and also I'm hearing some, you know, some rumors about him being familiar with at least one of those guys' wives, but we'll see if that actually holds up or not.
Yeah.
But we come to this place where you would think, right? The old definition of insanity, you know, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. We have seen a bunch of incidents where things go wrong, everything goes wrong, and somehow no one says, well, maybe the answer is dialing back the aggression. What if we incentivize police to not kill people? I know it sounds crazy. I know it sounds impossible.
Bill,
But,
come on, we're taking scalps. I mean, you know, you know, you got to have trophies, man. Come on, you know, you got to have that head up on the wall, man. I mean, come on,
right.
what are you talking about?
Well, I mean, once again, it does remind you of like the My Lai massacre and things like that. Where, I mean, it does. Where you have these people ride in, right? Because they ride in, and it's always into, you know, what they see as potentially hostile territory. They've got their, they're all their attentiveness turned up all the way, and if anybody so much as flinches, you know, bang, right? So it is.
Westmoreland called it search and destroy.
Right. Or well, they changed the word reconnaissance and force, which come see, come saw, right? Potato, 6 of one, half dozen rounds of the other. So you end up with this situation where these people get promoted or praised, right, for all this hyper aggressive behavior. And so there's no wonder that there's no emphasis on going the other way with these things. If you were to reward officers for, get bonuses for not discharging their firearms, if they got bonuses for not being involved for violent incidents, if they got promotions for having not been involved in, beatings or things like that. Like if it skyrocketed your career because you did not send people to the hospital with broken ribs, right? I mean, I think we would see something different. That's the closest thing we could get to, in my mind, real reform, is if the incentives were on getting your job done without anybody having going to the hospital or the morgue.
But Mr. Scott,
that's a hell of a point. That's a hell of a point. In that, again, working in child protection, there was a unit that had a mentality of, we're going to take your kids away. We're going to take your kids away. And I worked in a unit that focused on reunification. How do we fix the things that brought these cases in? And that wasn't, I clearly recognized right away that wasn't popular. That going to court, terminating rights, those kind of things, they thought that was a good job. They thought the people that really marched to do that was good work. And so I had that constant thing of, I had a lady come up from Mississippi to get her grandkids. They wouldn't give them to her. They said she didn't have no connection with these grandkids, that they had connection with the foster parent. I said, this woman came up here, drove up here, and I'm going to pay her for her gas, and I'm going to put her in a hotel. I said, why are you doing? I said, this is the humane thing to do. This is what we're supposed to do as an agency. And so and then to morph that back into the police, as Bill was saying, let's incentivize doing good work. Let's incentivize doing, so we don't have conflicts, so that that traffic stops, people don't get killed, that people don't.
But gentlemen, there has not been one of these instances where we have not had at least one officer that has had an incident before.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying,
Yeah.
but like what's the old saying? The proof is in the pudding. I mean, so it's. I hate to keep making this analogy, but it's kind of like you know whether or not you want to get a silver star, a bronze star,
Right.
or a good commendation award. Which one gets you promoted? The promotion comes with a silver star. Comes with a promotion. A
Right.
good
Well,
a good
component.
commendation medal gets you a shake from the company commander,
Yeah.
and maybe guard duty the next day. But
uh, yep. Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. There's so much invested, and sometimes literally invested, right? So they've
Yeah.
done studies where these people bring in these warrior mentality trainers, right? Who are almost always ex-military, and all these other things they bring in, and then they discover sometimes that the chiefs or the people high up and sometimes all the way at the top of all these police forces end up being like silent business partners of these same companies or same people. Like, oh, that's interesting. So, or they've invested in some of these companies that are supplying them with equipment. So there's a clear and obvious conflict of interest. So when Daryl Gates, right, a former, you know, Marine Corps company commander who also, right, was involved in the battle for the city of Way in '68, um, is before he becomes the chief, he's a rising star in the police force of Los Angeles, in the because he goes pretty much straight into that once he gets back from Vietnam. Why? Because he starts teaching the strategic Hamletization mindset, right? He starts. I mean, um, they literally imported a lot of the ideas that they'd used in South Vietnam into South Central Los Angeles, and Daryl Gates got promoted and promoted and promoted and promoted and promoted until eventually he was the chief of police. And he based so much, if not everything he accomplished, so much of, if you want to use the word accomplished, but the things that he did were so much based on, overwhelming force and, control of ingress and egress. And I mean, all the stuff he learned, right? All that stuff that they teach you when they make you, commander of a rifle company. So he treated the Los Angeles Police Force like a giant rifle company, James. And that's where they got that. Part of where they got. I mean, they had stuff going back, 50 years before that. Don't get me wrong, but he turned up the heat on it. Like he made it worse. And so that's what I'm saying. Until there is an equally powerful shift, where, like I said, instead of rewarding the most aggressive, the most violent officers, until you disincentivize that, and you make sure that the people getting pushed up, getting the attention, are the ones that figure out how to do their jobs with the least amount of force being exerted on the people that they are supposed to be policing. Until that complete 180 takes place, we'll be talking about something. I mean, I whoever that poor unfortunate person's name is in another day or two.
Brother Williams had a very interesting point, and I want to know what you guys think about this. And it's about the empowerment of the uniform, the badge, and the gun. Brother Williams asked us to reflect on the self hate that
Hmm.
leads to us turning on each other.
Mm-hmm.
What's your thoughts, Mr. Scott? I mean, this is again something that we have harped on since uh, the '60s, 1972. Whenever the uh, "Black is Beautiful" was supposed to overcome this so-called black hatred that uh, we were told that was ingrained in us. We became, during this particular period, people that recognized our roots. We wore afros, we wore dashikis, and I'm not saying that every you know black person that wore, a lot of Negroes wore dashikis. I'll put it
Did
like
you
that.
ever wear one?
Yeah, I did. You know, but I wore it because it was cool and because the girls liked it. So
Wow.
I'm just being truthful. That it had nothing to do with black power. It had nothing to do with black pride because I was a criminal. So but anyway, what was your thoughts on that, uh, Mr. Scott? How did we get away from that black power, that black pride, that black is beautiful? Yeah. How have we turned our back on that in these last 3, 4 decades?
James, I've thought about that question, and the only thing I can really come up with is white supremacy so strong that they've got us to buy into it for whatever. I mean, is it that strong that we even buy into it? When you look at these officers treating another black person like that, and I realize these things should be, as they say, such a thing as colorblind. Well, it doesn't exist because of all our programming. That's a fallacy. That's a fantasy. It just doesn't exist. But I mean, have we actually bought into this? Have we actually? That's what it seems like to an extent. I mean, you look at our news people, you look at people that look like us and what they say and how they tap dance around things, how they don't really hit things over the head and really give us, where's Tony Brown, Tony Brown's journal now? Where are things that we used to hear and see people that really delved into these things?
Tony Brown has been actually replaced by Jonathan Capehart. But that's another conversation for another day. Go ahead.
Yeah. Where is Muhammad Ali that says, I'm not going to Vietnam. I'm not fighting no people of color. They didn't do anything to me. Why am I going to go over there and kill them? And so we had a movement. I really believe coming up, we had a real movement. Back when I went to college, I didn't have to go to the war, but there was so much upheaval on campuses. We actually took over the school. We ran the president out of there. The National Guard came. There's a big documentary that somebody sent me. I've got to watch it to see if I'm in that thing. But after that, then we started seeing things at school like, oh, we have an African American studies class now. We have a black house where we can do, like the white folks had all their fraternities and everything. Now we have a place where we can go and do what we like to do, whichever. Well, I don't know what we were doing. Maybe some people might have been throwing dice or frying chicken. I don't know what I'm not saying anything about it. But so then they have the African studies class, and I go to the class, and everybody's like, "Oh man, they got an African studies class, man. This is going to be cool." And there's a white man standing up in there. And we're like, man, we've been black all of our lives. Now, what in the world is this man going to tell us? But what we did get is it opened our eyes to read books, to do things on our own, the James Baldwins, to go back into our history and to go back into what. And so that movement, at least it began, and I mean, it was on a perfunctory level. I mean, let's face it, it was on a perfunctory level. But that even has dissipated now, because now it's all inclusive. It's all diversity. We're all inclusive. And so when I hear that word, it ticks me off because we're the only one not included. Everybody else we're the only ones that's not included. And so I just think we're in a point where, again, I look at the organizations and the things. It was an effort It was an effort to get on the backs of others and really make this thing better for the next generation. Right now, this is a real crossroads to me. And when I see these things with those police there, when I see the whole issue of policing, all the things that I look at these news and talk, they don't talk about anything. They're just sitting around at a table, just, it's just going round and round in a circle. I mean, where is the real hitting back hard at these people? And what really needs to happen for us? For us. And I think this is white supremacy so deep that we've bought into it, that we've been just sucked into a vortex of it. I don't know. Maybe you think I'm wrong. I don't know.
Bill, we didn't tap into Mr. Scott's H-Rap Brown tonight. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, so when he starts talking about mau-mowing the pig, then we'll know he really has done it. The fact is that without teaching us self-hatred, you never make slavery work, because you have captives until you break their identities, until you destroy their sense of self. You just have captives. You don't have slaves. Yeah. Once you teach them self-hatred, once you teach them to identify with you and not identify with themselves, now you have slaves. And it took generations for the slave mentality to truly take hold. It's going to take generations for it to excise it. And remember, there's been no concerted effort to teach people how to stop being slaves, right? We just sort of figured out, well, slavery's over. Hey, Rastus, Becky Sue, it's over. Y'all, there's a school about 500 miles away if you'd like to walk to it and try to get an education. Good luck. I mean, think about what the end of the war actually was like for most people most Black people in America. About, 3.5% were free, right? And they were mostly in the North. There were, believe it or not, a handful of free Blacks in the South. I mean, a handful. When I say a handful, I mean a handful. But there were some, including a few who, had businesses, things like that. But they were a tiny minority. And when freedom comes, it also brings with it, a force that is there to terrorize them. And for the first couple of years, one of those things that's not taught well about American history is a lot of things were in flux, right? A lot of these, the Butler Plantation is the place that gives rise eventually to the whole 40 acres and a mule thing. The Butler Plantation was a very large plantation in the Sea Islands off the coast of South Carolina and part of Georgia. And they were very well known. They were known as good masters also, right? By that, they tended not to sell their slaves. They tried not to break up families, certain things that made them good masters. But eventually, a couple of generations in, the son who ends up running the plantation moves to Philadelphia, starts gambling away, everything. And then shortly before the war starts, really just not even a year and a half before the Civil War, they fall into terrible, debt and everything. He ends up having to sell off almost all of their slaves in the largest one-day slave auction in American history. There's a great book written about it called The Weeping Time. And it has a great insight into the relationship between slaves and their masters, right? And a lot of the slaves wept. Some of it was mostly because they were leaving their own family, their own kin, and being broken up. And, and once again, they tried sometimes even then to try to keep, couples together or parents and children together. But there was no consideration to grandparents, uncles, aunts, that stuff. You had to be, mother, father, husband, wife, or, husband, wife, a couple. They tried sometimes to keep them together. And some of them had been married, though, by slave preachers or whatever. So when the war ends, the butlers have fled, right? I mean, one of the son who runs the plantation lives in Philadelphia, believe it or not, despite the fact that he is a Southern slave owner. He has a home in Philadelphia. That's where he hangs out. So there's nobody minding the store, in essence, when the war ends. The slaves themselves take over the running of the plantation and turn it around, right? Because the plantation had been in trouble. Part of the reason he was trying to sell them off, but the remaining slaves turn it around. And when General William O. Howard, for whom Howard University is named, sees what they're doing, he says that's where he gets the whole idea of giving each one of them one of the old army mules that are being decommissioned because the war has ended. So, that's where the whole 40 acres a mule thing breaks it up into 40-acre lots or whatever. And then we know that when the white people come back, of course, okay, so we're all just kidding, right? There's a whole part of our history that is still not moved on from that point. The whole, oh, we were just kidding. You're free, but not really free. And when the police evolve, right, from being something that's really just a northern thing at first, to being a thing that eventually makes its way all across the United States, they just stepped into a role that the old slave patrollers had filled in the South, right? And it's not at all a coincidence. In fact, it is the opposite, that when slavery quote unquote goes away, remember the 15th Amendment still has a little out clause, I'm sure you know all too well, James, that you could not hold someone in involuntary servitude and force them to work without pay unless
crime,
right, unless they have quote unquote been convicted of a crime. So all of a sudden you see laws for things like vagrancy, laws for things like what's the other one where it's just loitering. That means loitering and vagrancy, right? They may have been on the books, but they weren't being pretty much ever, at least not very much enforced, or suddenly being enforced like crazy. So every black person who isn't clearly doing work for some white person at the time is suddenly being rounded up. And then convict labor replaces slave labor, right? And guess who benefits? The county sheriff, right? Because they're the ones that signed the contract to lend out the labor. So people talk about this for-profit prison thing like it's this brand. No, it's hundreds of years old. There's been a profit in putting black people in prison ever since the Civil War ended, basically. So all of this feeds into the same thing we're talking about, right? The incentives are not to dial back aggressive policing. They're the opposite. The incentives are to dial up aggressive policing. The incentives are to reward officers that actively engage, which active, of course, means violent, obviously, because active engagement has to be violent, right? So you're seeing people pushed up through the ranks, from patrolman to corporal to sergeant to lieutenant to captain, to superintendent to chief, based on, use term scalps, or whatever term you want to use, James. They're ones that are known as active, right? They're getting out there, they're shaking things up, right? They're not promoting the people who are building bridges to the community, the people who are, finding ways to try to increase understanding. No, they're increasing. They're promoting the ass kickers. So until we have, like I said, a total entire change, until there's no more incentives to keep imprisoning people, until there's incentives to not imprison people, until there's incentives to not violate people's rights, if there's strong enough incentives not to brutalize and even kill people, I mean, all the things we're talking about will come to no fruition until that happens. Until you say, hey, if you manage to go X amount of time without an incident, $1,200 in your bonus. If you go, 3 years, $4,000. You go 10 years, $10,000, right? I mean, I don't mind paying them to not
Yeah,
kill.
but I can break 3 heads in 6 months and get that every I mean, so,
Right. It's going to take a while. I didn't say it would be easy, James. I said if it were easy, somebody would have fixed it already.
but how familiar are you guys with YouTube? Are you familiar with any of those Audit the Auditor tapes?
Mhm.
Have you seen any of them?
I've seen some.
Have you seen some, Mr. Scott, where
What are they? Auditor tapes? What are
yeah,
they?
you had these people out in front of buildings, and they're taking pictures, and the police come up to them and ask them what they're doing and why they're recording and whatnot. And the reason why I bring this up is because I've been watching these different ones, and you can go on YouTube, like I said, and check them out. The most famous one is called Audit the Auditor. But anyway, and these guys are going to North Carolina, Alabama,
Yep.
South Carolina, Arizona, Texas. And when the police come up to them and ask them for ID, they say no.
Yep.
I do not have to give it to you under the First and Fourth Amendments. Now, we have seen tapes, video of what happens to black people on an ordinary traffic stop.
Yep.
One of the gentlemen even went so far as to tell the policeman, "Here's my ID. I have a concealed carry permit, and my gun is so forth or wherever
And
it was at."
literally, as he points to where the gun is located.
Yeah, and remember what you said, Bill. As he pointed, not went for it, but as my gun is, well,
That's as far as it goes.
there's a funeral. So, if you want to talk about a double standard, I have never. Now, some of them have been arrested. Some of it, and a lot of them end up making major bucks. They end up suing the sheriff's department, standing on their rights under the First and Fourth Amendment.
Yep. Yeah, the last one I saw was in a parking lot of a police precinct, I believe.
Yeah.
And the person even has I believe has a permit to carry and has a firearm on them, if I remember correctly, and the one I'm thinking of. And yes, the police officer he says, "May I see your permit?" It's like, no.
I have never, maybe somebody can find one, but I have never seen. I have seen incidents of these people going to jail.
Yes.
I have seen incidents of them being assaulted.
Yes.
But usually when this happens, they're the ones that end up getting a fat paycheck.
Yes, correct.
Why is it that we get a hole in the ground? How, Mr. Scott, if the policeman walks up to you and says, "Can I see your ID?" do you have the nerve to tell him, "No, you can't, under my rights by the First and Fourth Amendments"?
Are these things staged?
No.
I mean,
well, maybe they are, but I mean, if they are, like I said, just go on YouTube and put in Audit the Auditor, and you'll see things from 6 years ago, 10 years. I mean, so,
yeah.
Well,
would I mean,
well, you're a citizen. Why aren't your rights safe under the First and Fourth Amendment?
I got pulled over once coming from the gym, going across these railroad tracks. Then I've lived here 70 years. I've never seen a train on those railroad tracks. Okay, never. I was going to the gym every day then. There's a little stop sign there, and I just looked and kept going. And the next thing, the police lights on. I said, "Well, they can't want me. I didn't do anything." So I keep driving, and next thing I know, they sirens, and I'm pulled over. Okay, in the front seat is my gym bag with my wallet. Okay. So this guy comes up and says, "You got your license? You got your?" I said, "Yeah, but it's in this bag, you know." And I look over at the bag, and the other officer is over there with his hand on his gun. And so I'm just like, I got a license, I got insurance, but I don't know why you stopped me. Well, there was a stop sign back there. I said, but there's nothing to stop for. The train has never came. I stopped, and no, you did a rolling, and you're gonna stop me for this. And so I said my license is in my gym bag. So I wasn't gonna just reach into it.
Why not? You're a United States citizen protected by the Constitution. Why
And
not?
I was so pissed actually that they stopped me. My wife worked for the city of Richfield. And so I called him. I said, "Why in the hell did these people pull me over?" And the lady says, "Oh, I know your wife. We have lunch together every now." And look, that's not why. Why did they stop me? She says there was a training exercise. Okay, they just stopped. This officer was in training. You can get killed. That has actually happened where people were on a training type thing, and that person ends up dead.
The two officers with what was his name? George Floyd. Weren't two of those officers trainees?
Yes. They had just started.
And the officer that was with the lady that didn't know the difference between her taser and
that was a training. That was a training.
There was a training officer with her, So I mean, so do you is it like throw a trainee in there and if something happens sticky, well it was a training exercise. Bill. I mean, yeah. I mean, have you ever seen any of these any of these auditors killed, or I mean,
no, none of them have been killed. I think one or two of them have been kind of, things have gotten a little aggressive. Yeah, a little bit. I've seen that a couple of times. I've seen them get yelled at quite a bit, by police officers, and then they always very calmly say, I'm within my rights. I'm very impressed with how calm they are. But I've seen all the usual stuff. But for the most part, when the people demonstrate that they thoroughly understand their rights, a lot of the police either back down or they decide to call someone else. Right? Maybe if somebody else shows up, they'll be able to get through this person because they're not getting what I'm saying or whatever it is. But it's funny to see how stymied they are by it.
They don't even know. They're pulling people on, and they don't. Person starts throwing the Constitution at them, like, oh, and they're just perplexed. They just, eyes start rolling around in their head.
Yep. So you said staged. I mean, it's staged only in the sense that they have, they've set it up to see if they can capture police either doing the right thing or doing the wrong thing. So the police are clearly not in on it because very often they do everything possible to shut down the recording, including threaten people who are recording. And then once again, they respond once again, I'm completely within my rights to film you. There's no statute against filming a peace officer in carrying out their duties. So yes, the police do not enjoy being taped. And the thing that
I think just to give you an example of what you're talking about, Bill, I think it was here in Los Angeles that they increased. It used to be 8 to 10 feet from the police, and I think it's been increased now to 20 feet.
Okay, pushed it out. Okay.
Yeah. If you have an old iPhone like mine, you're not quite as clear. Doesn't make it 20 feet doesn't make any difference to the new iPhone, but to the older ones, and and maybe you just can't quite see things in the right perspective. But as I said, I've never seen any of these auditors actually been a fatality.
Well, good. It remains the case.
But then, well, that's another show too, because it does seem like less than 12% of these people are black, and I may be very brave, but I'm not sure if I would go down in North Carolina and confront the sheriff about whether or not it's my right to exactly film him. That's just out of self-preservation. That's little common sense. But I see Miss Sims is here, and uh, I I had a question that I've been holding back for quite some time. And I'm glad that Miss Sims is here. But Miss Sims, let's first of all welcome you to the show. How are you doing this evening?
Thank you. I'm fine, doing well.
What were your first outtakes from the murder of Mr. Nichols?
First of all, I literally had to make myself view the video in regards to the human spirit. I mean, you see so much killing and negativity over and over. It affects you. But I needed to do that in order to have the conversation here. And immediately when I started watching it, it reminded me down through the ages how there would be public, when there were executions, whether they were beheadings or hangings and whatever, how people, it would draw an audience. Whether it was during colonial times with the stock with the guillotine or the hangings through the years, or sometimes in certain countries and militaries and stuff people came. It was entertainment during some stages through the ages, and then there were some times when people were required to watch that. And immediately as I was viewing it, that came to mind, which was even more effective to me in watching that. And the first thing that I thought, well, what are the rest of us going to do about this happening over and over and over again? And then my mind went to what is going on behind the scenes, that I said this for, that continually gives police the comfort, the feeling and comfort level of doing this. Restraining people like this in such a way, and to the point that they are injured or even death occurs. There has to be a comfort level, because it hasn't stopped from state to state or whatever. And for someone to keep doing something, there has to be a comfort level. One of the comfort levels I think that might be there for them in regards to their unions and stuff, that they're going to get away with it. That's a big incentive for you to keep doing something over and over, that you're going to get away with it. And then it was real disgusting as I watched, and this happens over and over, where where they have the person restrained or whatever, and the officers are bragging about it. I mean, it's like an accomplishment. It's like football players when they made a touchdown or something. There seems to be glee built into that, and part of that is, I think, them feeling a comfort level of getting away with doing something like that over and over again. And then I looked at, why does it take 4 to 5 men to restrain one person? Are the officers getting in each other's way? And sometimes it happened during this video, I believe. The person was able to get up and run.
It's called overwhelming force, Miss
Right,
Sims, and it's a tactic that's taught both, in the military as well.
Well, whatever these officers are doing, it seems like maybe they're getting in each other's way because they struggle. I mean, it's like 5 to 1. I mean, if you restrain a person in the right place, I would restrain the legs, because you have somebody's legs, they're not going to get up and run. And so part of that comes into the training, what's going on. And so it just can't continue to happen. We can't allow it to continue to happen.
Well, I agree with what you said, especially the part about it looks like this is something that they've been doing. I mean, it looks like that was something that they have done before. It looks like that they were so nonchalant about it. You know, they just smoking a cigarette. You know, I mean that part really looks like it was something that's what they do. I mean, yeah, it was disgusting on
Yeah, and
all levels.
it may not been these particular officers done it over and over, but they've seen it being done around the country over and over with various different police departments, and it has to stop.
Miss Sims, I spoke about this earlier, and I blamed our generation. So I want your thoughts on this. Um, our generation, speaking of, uh, people born during our period, put forth the proposition that if the police looked like us, that they would be more apt to be a part of the community, and also you would have a certain amount of trust uh, in the police because they looked like you. Well, Miss Sims, almost all of those policemen looked exactly like Tyree.
Yes, and I think the attitude that you just expressed through the year during our generation, maybe that was true to an extent, but and in some people's lives, and maybe that some communities did experience that. Some of the sons and daughters that came out of a particular community, became officers and stuff. But then there were instances like myself. I didn't grow around black policemen and things like that. I'm from Charleston, West Virginia, and so that may have been what you're saying may have been true in the past and somewhat down through the years, but nowadays with how our society has changed and our values and our behaviors, and evil behavior does not stop at any particular culture or race or whatever. And so you have to put that into it, the culture of how we feel free to degrade each other and not have the same thoughts and respect of each other in what we do. A lot of that is out there now. So I don't think even if we go back to that, James, um, the uh, the behavior has to change. I, I mean, I could have a police living next door to me if that behavior hasn't changed in the contracts and whatever. Um, we'll still have continue to have and do what we're doing now.
So is there a common ground in which our community can meet the police? Because it would seem to me that we are just as fearful of being of the police now as we were pre-civil rights era. Even though the police may look like us, I mean, has anybody kept any statistics for blue on black crime?
I think you're right, and I've thought of this in the past in terms of people's behavior. I think each group fears the other. With so many guns out there now, and people are allowed to carry guns in various states, different rules and things like that. So now you have two populations of people, citizens versus law enforcement. Each of them have a certain amount of fear, knowing This person could have a gun. This person couldn't have a gun. And so with that in mind, you take that into in going into certain situations. Each party has a high distrust of what can happen and what will turn out. And even the black men that have this in their mind, but when they're being stopped by the police, and even though they say and prove their innocence in terms of not going to cause any problems, that hasn't stopped in a lot of cases them being murdered or injured. And I think also I made some notes. I think I also looked at the medical response, and so I think that anytime that many officers are called, the medical response people should be right there at the same time versus the police do what they're going to do. If you know, and we know from experience that many people, 4 to 5 to 1, that there's going to be some sort of injury or causes of death or whatever. So you know that's inevitable. So when the policemen are called and they know that many people are going to try to restrain one person, I think the medical community should be right there versus having to wait for them the police do what they're going to do and restrain. Sometimes it takes a while. Then they need to be called, and then somebody else needs to come. And so possibly doing that could help prevent some of the deaths or whatever, having the medical response right there immediately.
Let's talk about that, Mr. Scott. What were your first thoughts? You know, knowing your background and how things work, even within the city. What was your response on the 20 minutes that they waited before before they called the EMT, and then after the EMTs got there, they waited before they actually took care of Trye. If you look at the video, he's propped up against the vehicle on a tire when they get there. What's your thoughts, Mr. Scott?
Yeah, no sense of urgency at all. I mean, no aid being rendered, no just basic 101 police work, EMT work, nothing. I mean, basically it was total inhumanity. No humanity towards this young man whatsoever. And then it was piling on. I mean, okay, you got the police there, they're not going to call to 20 minutes. And then when the emergency, EMT means emergency medical technicians. That's what they are, emergency. So when they're called, that's what they should be ready to respond. Like, this is an emergency. They see a man in distress. They didn't do anything. So they're all derelict in their duty. I thought it was pathetic. It was terrible to watch. And, firing them and getting rid of them is ex post haste is what I saw, and what should have happened. They didn't follow any protocols. They didn't. I mean, the officers sitting around, like I said, smoking cigarettes, just milling around like this wasn't even the person that they're dealing with. I mean, it was heinous. But just like what we saw with Derek Chauvin, an officer that was in charge of these other officers that walked around like he was in a Western movie or something, put his hand on his gun, prancing around, just sickening. Just sickening. And it's like what I was saying earlier. Have we bought into this white supremacy mentality? I don't know. I don't know what to say. This stuff keeps going on. And you think the Floyd was supposed to be a watershed type of a thing to stop this stuff. Dante Wright gets killed during the trial. She forgets her taser and can't mix it up. Boy, that's what I thought. I was told. I was just disgusted.
Bill, there weren't even any officers, lieutenants, command staff called until after the incident. What are your thoughts on that, Bill? The thoughts, by the response by upper level cadre or officers, and the response of the EMT. Bill? Is Bill still here? Yeah, Bill's up there. Bill might have nodded out.
No, I'm in the show right now.
Yeah, but Miss Sims, Dr. Casey isn't here tonight. She's a little under the weather. But there was a very disturbing statement that was made, and it was on the Tucker Carlson Show. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with Jason Whitlock or not. He used to be on ESPN and different places, but he is very much known as a black conservative. And when he went on Tucker Carlson, here's what he said. Tucker Carlson said that it looked like a bunch of young black men engaged in gang violence, that it had been raised unsupervised by single black mothers.
I read that.
And if you look at Jason Whitlock, is a black man. I just want to clarify that. But what's your thoughts on someone coming on, a black man coming on Fox News and making this type of a statement? Does this contribute to our self-loathing?
I read that when you sent it, and I think as a black community in a black culture.
No, I want to know what you thought about it as a black woman. I'm not going to let you duck and dodge. I want to know, what did you think about that as a black woman?
That's what I'm telling you.
And as a parent of black children.
That's what I'm saying. And I read it several times in regards to how we as allow each other to down. I think the things we say about each other as black folk and the negative, especially a lot of the negative things, we teach other cultures and races. They pick up on some of the things we're saying about each other, so they feel comfortable in saying it themselves. And I saw that the mother bit. I thought, that as a mother, as a woman, as somebody that looks at people's behavior, no matter what color they are or whatever, it's like it's intentionally putting negative things out there, and so much negative things that we say to each other, where other cultures pick up on. It's just here again, chipping away at other people, even us, thinking that there aren't positive things and positive people happening and going on in this world and whatever. And it's like an intentional blame and an intentional. I guess it felt it more so in him talking about black single women, that he took this chance to say such negative things, maybe based on some of the negative and bad experiences he personally has had through his life or relationships and things like that, because those two things they didn't go together in regards to what was happening. And here again, going really out of the depths to blame one particular a particular a person or group of people for all that's happening in regards to this particular violence and black on black crime. And you better believe that it is happening to other cultures. This crime on crime it's not necessary. I think just us using the term black on black crime, it makes
It's crime.
in some people's mind, black people are only doing the crime and bad things. Why? While other is going on in other cultures and other communities also. But we don't hear about it because as a society, we put black folk and what's going on in their lives seem to be the first anything negative seems to be put out there in regards to us and what's going on. And we could say nobody has, I don't think I've ever heard them say when a lot of shootings at schools, elementary schools, mass killing of children, is usually done by young white males. And I haven't heard any terms or anybody come up with a term regarding a white male that, like killers of children, white males killers of children, things like that. What you say and how you say it matters to people, and it matters when you say it and how you say it.
Mr. Scott, you were talking about earlier about your experiences in child services. Did you find that type of attitude prevalent in that particular group that you were talking about that were proactive in taking children away from their family and their mothers? Did you find that type of attitude pervasive?
I did to an extent, and it kind of goes back to some of the things that Bill was saying earlier about being incentivized for these things. What a lot of people don't realize is that if you take children out of the home and you put them into out of home placement, there's something called the 4E reimbursement for states to do that. So in other words, there's financial incentive to break up people, to break up homes, to put kids in out of home placement. And a lot of people don't realize this 4E is a reimbursement from the federal government to states that do that. And there's not an incentive because since there's a revenue stream, it's this incentive to continue to do that. There's no incentive to say, well, I've reunified all these people. They don't give you any type of a monetary or any kind of benefit for that. So I saw it, and I thought it was pretty pervasive, actually. And one of the reasons that I just had enough of it and left. I didn't see the resources should have been for housing. And another thing, when I came to the child protection, I had worked for years in rehabilitation, where I was working with people to get into new careers, to get into training, finish your GEDs, those kind of things. But in child protection, no, that's not our business. We don't pay attention to that. We want them to do what we tell them to do. If they get off the drugs, they have clean ways. Then they've done what we've asked them to do, and we're out of their life. Well, yeah, but they still don't have any housing. They still don't have financial wherewithal to survive. Their kids are not in school. Well, that's not our problem. So yeah, I saw that throughout these agencies that they don't really address the issues that you would think that they would, and that they have the resources to address. They don't do
it. Brother Williams, how are you doing this evening?
I'm good.
Okay. I told Brother Williams when he came on air today that I was going to put him to work because he proposed a very interesting question to the email that I had sent about what do we want to talk about tonight. And so Brother Williams is going to talk about our codependencies that is lead to the less informed and involved population base. But before you start that conversation, uh, Brother Williams, since we always talk about family, what did you think about the Jason Whitlock's remarks as far as how did he put it? It looked like a bunch of young black men engaged in gang violence that had been raised unsupervised by single black mothers.
Well, and when I look at the police brutality and it being black on black, to me it just goes back to self-hate. That's I can't see it any other way other than self-hate and the fact of the way law enforcement and I speak on this before when I talk about how law enforcement has become so militarized. And so from that standpoint, they view the community as hostiles, even though we're talking about our own people. But blue is the first and foremost allegiance. So they have an allegiance to the police force. And so I mean, I can't really speak on that comment because that's a negative comment into itself. But at the same time, what I think we're dealing with is we're dealing with some people that were raised from the standpoint of dealing with self-hate. I happen to know an officer that was a friend of mine growing up, and one of the things he dealt with when he was young was an inferiority complex, and becoming a police officer fulfilled that desire to have that self-worth and that desire to be a person in a position of power. And when you're coming from a background where you had an issue with seeing the value in your life, and then you're put in a position where you're able to take other people's lives and livelihood from them, that could be a dangerous combination. And so I think oftentimes when we're dealing with law enforcement from that background, then that is going to lead to situations to where what we saw happen, and then they look at each other as just another day on the job, thinking that again that was going to be what everything they was doing was justified. They didn't want for one bit feel like they went overboard, and that's because when you view the society as hostiles, that's what you're going to get, and that's why they also had to disband that unit. I mean, regardless of what the acronym stand for, when you think of a scorpion, you think of something that's going to attack. I mean, you can dress it up and make it pretty all you want, but no.
Uh, so
You gonna say something? Okay.
uh, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I just
Okay.
heard so.
No, I wanted you to expand a little bit more on that topic about uh, well, I guess self hatred also blends into that. But
Yep.
when you talk about uh, our codependence, uh, and I was kind of when you said the involved population base,
I meant uninvolved is what
uninvolved.
I meant.
Okay, yeah, okay. But can you like kind of elaborate on that codependence part?
Okay, basically what I'm talking about is when you think about a codependency, we can just look at this from any societal perspective, especially when you deal with large populations. One of the things that we benefit from through the advent of technology is the ability to not have to uh, be concerned about certain aspects of our lives. That in itself creates a codependency upon the very system, because you depend upon it for certain types of things. For instance, the same way we can just go down the street and go to a grocery store and stock a refrigerator and not have to worry about, the kind of things that you would back before industrialization, to where you have to go out and crop and actually know how to hunt and know how to raise, know how to till the garden and know how to, eat off the land, it creates a codependency on a system. So when we talk about law enforcement, we're talking about a type of codependency that has it to where basically we're in a society, in a system, to where our security and our quote unquote collective well-being is taken care of. We don't have to necessarily walk down the street with a gun. We don't have to look around the corner everywhere we go. Obviously, there are some places where it is bad like that, but generally speaking, we do not have to be mindful of the environment that we operate from, and so therefore we have a codependency upon the very justice system that we're upset and enraged about right now in terms of how law enforcement can get out of control. So when I talk about that codependency and I talk about a uninvolved population base, it's because, especially through the way imperialism and capitalism works with us, we're busy with our lives. We're busy with 9 to 5. We're busy just trying to deal with raising our household, put food on the table, keep a roof over our head. And the codependency that we have on us on the system, based upon how it treats us as labor, creates a situation to where we rely upon it to a degree to where we don't know how to be involved and don't care to be involved. We basically exchange freedoms and we exchange self-sufficiency or self-determination for rights, and that creates a certain level of codependency. So when things go wrong for collective people in regards to that, then what you have happen is, because I've been so codependent upon a system, because I've been able to not monitor, not see how the intricate aspects of that system works, and I've benefited from that level of ignorance. When things fall apart, I oftentimes don't know where to begin. And so we find that what we suffer from through aspects of civilization are certain types of codependencies. And this is what government entities create and the structures create. Also goes back to why I say most people feel like if they simply vote, then they've done their part. And after they voted for somebody, put someone on in office, and that person claim that they're going to do everything in their power to, seek justice, to do the right thing for the people, represent the population to the in a righteous manner, and people buy into that political genre, and something does happen and or doesn't go the way that they thought it would go based upon who they voted for and how the politicians generally act in the public's view, then they act surprised, they act concerned and let down and disappointed, angry, mad, but don't necessarily know how to go about fixing it. So this codependency that I'm talking about creates levels of basically us being an uninformed and uninvolved population. And so to me, it goes hand in hand with what's happening with our justice system, and it goes hand in hand with what's happening with the economy right now, and it goes hand in hand with inflation. It goes hand in hand with the war in what's happening in
Ukraine.
yeah
Ukraine.
Ukraine. But I was also thinking about what's getting ready to happen with China. The technology war that's happening between the United States and China over Taiwan. But I mean, all of this goes hand in hand based upon a codependency. That codependency is creating a situation where the United States rely upon the technology that's built, and United States basically help create the environment to where the factories and the manufacturing is done in Taiwan. And so for them to allow China to move in and take over is not something that the United States can afford. So that creates a codependency. That codependency requires the United States to defend that country, which will require the United States to go to war, and so on and so forth. So levels of globalization again creates codependencies amongst the population. But the masses of the people that are uninvolved simply don't get that. And so when things happen the way they do, to where gas prices shoot out the roof, inflation goes up, and we start seeing an increase in racism, an increase in white supremacy again, folks look around and don't know how to respond because we've created these codependent environments.
And along with that, I think people don't realize the political aspect of their local government. Here's the city council and the police department. So when you, because their actions said they may be real concerned about how police are killing our black men and our sons, but they won't vote for to go and vote, say, in the city council election. And I think one of the reasons is they don't realize how intertwined, how the city council is connected to the police in regards to they are the ones that sign. The city council is the one that signs contracts with police departments, and they have some say so to an extent of how the police are going to supposed to respond to the citizens, et cetera, et cetera. I was listening the other day to one of our city council meetings, and they were talking about how they were going to go into a session because no one had been keeping track of the officers when they were off duty. What these off duty, it wasn't like overtime. It was no one had been keeping track of what and where these off duty policemen were taking and picking up jobs in the community or playing security at bars, et cetera, et cetera. And they were just seeing, I didn't realize that, but the city council was just getting ready to get involved to investigate that type of stuff related to police behavior and possibly we playing a part in the negative manners in which they deal with the citizens. And so here again, our politicians, to me, they don't have a real handle, or else I think some of the ways down through the years they have treated policemen and put them on a pedestal. And I always wondered how this immunity got started. It may have functioned way back whenever it was brought to came to light. But nowadays, this automatic immunity that police have, it's inappropriate, and it here again it leads to that comfort level of them doing what they do to the citizens, to the residents of whom they're supposed to be protecting and serving. So to me, that needs to be dealt with. Looking at the contract that the city has with the police department. I've been trying to find information in regards to that, actually seeing what the contracts say. And other than that, and I think the residents still have some fear or don't realize that they can have an input on the police department's behavior towards us, et cetera, et cetera. They feel helpless in being able to do something, or not knowing, like Robert just said, not knowing what to do or where to do. And when you vote people into office, you just don't walk away and leave them to do what we think. A lot of times we think that these people, they want to be in office, that they know what to do, that they know what's going on. And as I've been listening to a lot of the city council folks in meetings, they don't know a lot more than I do. It seems to be like a learning experience for them. While at the same time, we don't have time for you to learn these things in a sense, because while you're learning, we're being killed. And in bottom line, it gets down to the citizens and the city council persons, because they pay taxes. We're paying the policemen to kill us. Our money is allowing them to kill us.
Yeah. Well,
That doesn't make sense at all.
But we've been faced with. Go ahead, Brother Williams.
I just want to say something about that, because I want us to put that one element, that one element in perspective, just in regards to any job that someone may have a responsibility of doing. To me, when you talk about, and just use a police officer in general, on paper, the ability to go out and protect and serve. On paper, you want me as a police officer, quote unquote, to be able to be in a position to where I don't have to second guess a move I make as a result of what may happen next when I'm dealing with a violent criminal, or dealing with a confrontation or a situation that is life threatening or may put the public at harm. So on paper, the idea and the theory behind it is sound to a degree. The problem we run into is the morality and the fact that, again, when the police department creates an environment to where you have the militarization and you have people that join the police force who are ex-military, have the mindset already of being in a combat zone, and carry that mindset and on the beat with them and on the streets with them, when they think about the concept of protect and serve, then what happens is that sense of obligation to protect and serve gets warped into being on a battlefield, in a battlefield environment, to where, again, having the ability to be able to decipher a situation and deal with it from a humane standpoint. If you look at yourself as being on a battlefield, then the person at the other end of that trigger, you're not going to look at them as being as a human. You're not going to look at them as being, someone's son, someone's father. You, at that moment in time, your concentration is looking at it from a position of life and death. So on paper, it makes sense that I want to equip a person with the right tools to be able to do the job. The problem comes into certain aspects of how it is practiced and how it's disseminated within a certain sector of a population, and how that, again, is layered on top of racism, layered on top of oppression, and all of the other things that create this powder keg that cause the end result to not necessarily be what it sounded like on paper. And I think that's just kind of where we are with this situation, which to me kind of goes right back to creating a level of codependency. And now you have to be able to step back and find out how to correct the system. When you especially allowed a system that has been able to create a separation between the police department and the officer from the standpoint of accountability. When you have a situation where now the police department can't even be sued based upon the actions of an officer, how do you expect things to change? Because when it boils down to it, a lot of times in this society, in order to at least get somewhat of a sting in terms of the situation, some pocketbooks got to really be broken, and you create a situation where that can't even happen now.
Mr. Scott, listening to what Brother Williams just said, is Mr. Fry going to get a third term? Considering his relationship with the Minneapolis Police Department?
Well, as far as Mr. Fry, I think he's probably ready to try to move on to bigger things. I mean, I think that when he got this job, he didn't sign up for all of this that he's doing. I think he's clearly someone that wants to move up in the ranks. But in regards to what Brother War said, it just thinks me back to something that I had said earlier, and that is white supremacy so strong that we've even bought into it? That when we get in these jobs, I mean, we have black mayors, we have black police chiefs, but we don't see enough change. We don't see things being changed the other way. I mean, it's almost like they get these jobs, but you would think that they at that point have the power, that they have something that's going to allow these things to start changing the other way. But I don't see it. I mean, a perfect example is these officers in Memphis. I mean, their behavior, their actions. I mean, I don't know what the counter to this is. If we're buying into this thing, if we're not seeing what's happening to us, if we're not seeing the effect of these things on our families, on our economy, I mean, here they got a big push, and they had me talk to some group about redlining here in the Twin Cities. So they're going through every one of the deeds in every one of these things to see which is redline. I said, all you got to do is put it, and we're talking about put it on paper. We're say that those things are null and void now. Any of these covenants or all these things that they had on real estate that said that this can't be, you can't sell this to black people in this neighborhood. You can't. Well, all those things should just be null and void. I mean, I think the Constitution, the local laws, all those things have erased all that stuff. But yet they're still saying, well, we're going to go by one and look at it. For what? If they come up, throw it out, tear it up, put it in the garbage can. But we continue to muddle through these things instead of really hitting the nail on the head. And I don't know what it is that we bought into the white supremacy, is that we bought into and accepted it. I mean, I don't know.
Let me say this. Remember now, what a lot of people, I think what we fail to see is that we're dealing with a modern day plantation. And remember, some of the best slave catchers were slaves.
Yes.
Okay. And today is no different. I stated earlier, when you talk about a people or a person that may be brought up with an inferiority complex, which is a result of living in an environment of racism that creates a condition to where my skin being black is something that I'm ashamed of. And you put a person that has that mentality, you give them a badge and you give them power. What do you think is going to happen when they encounter another black person and they have self-hate for themselves because of who they are? That level of quote unquote embarrassment of me not liking what I am, and I have power now to take the life of somebody. I'm definitely going to act up and cut up when I see somebody that I assume is like me and committing a crime, so to speak, and bringing shame, even further shame, of how I feel about myself. We have to accept the fact that, again, through white supremacy, through oppression, a lot of the psychological conditions that we deal with as a people are going to trickle down. And from that standpoint, we see what happened. The oppressed emulate the oppressor. And it's no different than how it will be with an abusive relationship, to where just say a woman particularly gets hit and beat up by her husband, and instead of leaving the situation, it comes to accept that as a form of showing love. That's how sick our society is, even when it applies to law enforcement. And to some degree, we are living out a condition of inferiority complexes that we have collectively about ourselves. And when these kind of things happen, and we step back and we look at them as individual, quote unquote, isolated incidents, then we don't see the bigger picture and don't realize that we're dealing with just a sick society all across the board.
Bill, you want to comment
I
on?
want to hear Bill.
So we have, this is perfect and it's beautiful. We have this approach to, as we said before, looking at our communities that should be receiving, if indeed what the stated goals and the real goals have not been the same, right? So the stated goals, once again, we want to make people feel safe, and we want to, protect and serve, and blah blah blah. But the real goals have always been, like I said, scoreboard mentality. I got 3 last night. How many did you get? Right? So when you have this air of competition, once again, where the rewards are always go to the most aggressive, the most violent, the most, right, the person with the most contacts, active contacts, and that. When you combine that with what was just said, right? Until we have the ability to, one, designate who is allowed to be police, right? Even the places where they have civilian review boards, right? And the civilian review boards do what? They sometimes get to write a strongly worded letter that they disagree with the findings. Oh, we disagree with the findings. That's what they get to do. If they do that, if the community itself, if all they can do is complain, then we've got what we've got now, right? That's what we already have to get to complain. If you shift it so that 50% of the decision about who gets to even wear the badge, who gets to carry the gun, is left to the community themselves. The community sends representation that isn't just there to be a rubber stamp, isn't just there to agree with whoever it is that already is making policy. But they say, no, we don't want that one. Now you got to send that one back. Maybe he can be police someplace, but he can't be police here. And until the community has a way of being the first filter, right? Until they have a way of being empowered enough that if they say, no, we're not, hey, good for you that you qualified for yet another one of these grants that provides, armored personnel carriers, basically. But no, you can't have one, right? Until you give the community itself the ability to do those kinds of things. Once again, we're spinning our wheels. We'll be talking again about what do we do next time when something else awful happens. When people talk about defunding or revising, or pick a term, the police and how they're funded, what they're usually doing is they're close, right? They're around it. They're honing, but they didn't get there, right? They got close. Until there's actual community control, no matter how you play with the budgeting, you're not going to fix the problem. The problem is that from the 1830s to now, the focus has always been on the person who is the most, quote unquote, effective. But effective has always meant, from 1838 to now, from when Boston cut the ribbon on the first modern police precinct to now, they still say, oh, this person had X number of arrests. Oh, this person found X number of weapons. They busted somebody with X amount of drugs, right? It's still always a scoreboard mentality. And instead of looking at people that, like I said, build bridges with the community, instead of looking at people who prevent the need to kick down doors, right? They're still rewarding the door kickers, right? They're still rewarding the ones that have managed to take down the most bad guys, right? Right? Scoreboard. Until you shift, and I know it's going to be hard because people are going to push back hard against it, because it changes everything they thought they knew about police work and everything they thought they knew about effectiveness. But you have to do it until this changes. This changes. We're just moving the pieces around, right? Until we make these fundamental changes. If this comes back to why the Black Panther Party came, amongst the main reasons they came into existence in the first place, was because police forces treated our neighborhoods like an occupying force treats the battle ground that they've conquered. And And because I'll land right here, because they also incentivize people with military experience. They quite literally sometimes are bringing in, conquerors, right, to patrol these areas, and not people who truly are going to create a peaceable environment, right? Because I hear the term peace officer thrown around very often, and I have to chuckle because they're basically war officers as opposed to peace officers.
A couple of things I want to address here. First of all, I want to talk about how everybody puts this on the warrior's mentality and conquering and all these type of things. Some of the greatest warrior societies, be they Chinese, be they American indigenous, whatever, leadership was not necessarily based on how many kills you had, but you counted coup.
Yes, sir. Yep. Right.
So and it also had to do with your ability to communicate with others in the tribe and bring them together, which are things I asked the question earlier, Brother Williams. Well, I'm going to go off track a minute. Two of the best movies that I watched this week on Bounce. One of them was The Debaters. I don't know if you guys have ever seen that one. With it was when black was it Wiley College debated Harvard. Bill, do
Yes.
you remember that?
I know. Yes.
The first black college to ever defeat Harvard in a debate.
Correct. Yep.
And the other was a version of the founding of the Panthers that had everyone in it from Dick Gregory to I want to say what's the guy with the glasses? Tommy something. But it had I think even Chris Rock was in it.
Yeah, the 1995 film Panther.
Right,
Yep.
right,
What you're talking about?
right. And it these are things that I feel we have gotten away from. What happened to black power? What happened to black pride? What happened to black is beautiful?
Well,
Go ahead, Brother Williams.
Well, to me, it goes into what I say a lot of times on the show is that we forget that we are at war, and we forget that we are behind enemy lines. And like even what you saw with certain parts of that movie, which was fictionalized, but it was based in truth, on how it ended, showing you the war on drugs. The war on drugs is a hell of a war that had been intertwined within again the black economy to create situations to where you create a culture within the black community of crime, and then you come in with a solution to fight crime and then get tough on crime. And that goes back into the whole play within politics to where the person that presents a solution is actually the one that secretly created the problem so that I can present you a solution to that problem, which really just goes back to me again into the aspect of talking about how the prison system here in the United States is based on basically a way to enact a form of slavery all over again.
Yep.
And so, therefore, what you're dealing with is talking about imperialism. You're dealing with a society that is based upon free labor, a society that is based upon condemning a specific population and creating all of the right mixtures to make it hard as hell for that population in that group of people to rise up and be able to operate from a level playing field. So whether we talk about being in a physical battlefield or a psychological battlefield or economic battlefield or spiritual battlefield, we are all at war. And this war is not only pinning us against an enemy that we most of the time can identify with, but it's also an enemy that we can see, and it's also an enemy that looks like us. So we're being attacked from all sides. And as a result of that, we get this mixture that we see to where the the answer, or should I say the solution, is very complex and convoluted, although we may get answers. And see, that's the thing that is very elusive, is that the answer oftentimes to justice is a scapegoat. And I have to refer back to one of the elements that I think most people don't know about Satanism, is that the scapegoat is actually one of the oldest tricks in the book, and it's a satanic trick. Just because I grant you a scapegoat, that's actually part of how the system is designed to run and continue to run. It's no different than how you look at an insurance company who is a business, and that business is a profitable business and is meant to be a profitable business. And the way it operates is that within the way it does its business, there is a percentage of claims that are built into the budget. And so, from that standpoint, when someone does make a claim, when some cop does get arrested, when some cop does get thrown behind bars, or when someone does sue the system, that percentage was already built, buffered in with the way the system is designed to operate. And so when you have these scapegoats, and then you have people referring to that as justice because such and such was found guilty, or they're going to be put on trial and they're going to serve life behind bars. Kind of like Bill was saying, the deal is with that type of answer, all you're going to get is a little bit of time before the next incident of the same magnitude or worse will happen again. And then you're going to get the same answer, because that is what the system is designed to do. And I think what we fail to realize from that standpoint is when we say the system is the system is not working, I think we're mistaken, because it is working. It is doing exactly what it was designed to do. It is our interpretation and misunderstanding of how the imperialist system works is the problem. Because again, we don't recognize that we are targets. We don't recognize that we are at war. We don't recognize that our communities are being designed to not be able to be self-sufficient. That the way we are, again, created to be codependent, or created to be domesticated, created to be poor consumers as opposed to producers, is how it is designed to operate. And I think that's the thing, is that we forget where our place is. We forget where we've been placed on the chessboard, not knowing what's really going on. See, we've been told that we're playing chess, but you're playing it with checker pieces. So we don't recognize the board that we're on, and we're trying to play the game the wrong way.
Penitentiary chess, where you have to make them out, where you have to make your pieces out of soap. Mr. Scott, do you think that this is what's happening with the George Floyd situation, and why they have set this gentleman up, Mississippi, I think you called him, as the leader? Is this part of the Minneapolis police or city part to ensure that the black community never evolves from this situation and remains, as I said about some of the parcels in Detroit and Newark and other places that have been burned down since the 60s and 70s? Is this what's the plan for Minneapolis?
Yeah, I think the plan for Minneapolis is to join the crowd, like the other cities have been. My grandfather lived in Detroit, and I used to go there quite a bit, both to Chicago and Detroit for summers. And one of my most disappointing things when I went to Detroit, I wanted to go to this great chicken place, Dot and Etta's. Oh boy, those sisters, I'm telling you, they put on a plate. I was thinking about it on the plane. I get there, it's all boarded up. Everything's all boarded up all around there. And that's the way things are here. We never seen, growing up here and going back and forth from Chicago and Detroit, in the late 60s and 70s, I saw how those cities just changed. You go to the store, you got bars on the windows now. You got to hand your little money through a little thing that turns around. Everything is fortified. And now that's what all of a sudden, now you see all the graffiti, you see all the things that I used to see there, right here. I mean, so I don't see a recovery right now. I mean, it's unsafe, and Miss Sims would know. She's probably heard this too. It's unsafe to ride the light rail transit here. The light rail transit, they don't charge you a fare now. They're just scared to collect money. I rode that thing in Chicago a couple summers ago, and there were armed guards on the train. You put your ticket right in front of the thing. If you don't have a ticket up there, they will put you off at the next stop. Period. They don't have any of that stuff going on there, and so here they don't know what to do. I mean, they're really perplexed as to this wave of what we're seeing, crime, and they don't have a plan to deal with it. And with the George Floyd, it's going to be interesting. I was hoping that they would open the street up and do something to say, yeah, that's not what we are. That's not what the city is. But they don't seem to be in any hurry to do anything. And they allow people, the police don't even come around there anymore. It's just a no police zone at all. Anything goes there. They say you can go there and buy all your little stuff and all of whatever you want. Police don't even go through there. And so that terrorizes the neighborhood. It spreads out into the neighborhoods. I just see no movement. I just see all of our major cities have been hollowed out like this. And I guess that seems to be the wave of. It's here now. We are, and we've even been called a Detroit of the Midwest. We've even started to be called names like that. And I still love going to Detroit. I still love the area. I still have relatives and friends there. I still love the cultural aspects of the city. But as far as the structural, what they're doing with the schools, what they're doing with education, what they're doing with jobs, things have changed so quickly, and the script has been flipped. When I used to go to Detroit, everybody had a new car. Everybody had a new car in Detroit. They all worked at the plants. It was a whole different vibe. As of now, oh, guys, those inner city places, they're just abandoned. People have just left it. The core is a hollowed out husk. And I think we're headed toward that. And I don't see a turnaround. Jacob Trye, the little mayor, I think he'll move on. He'll collect this and try to go maybe to Congress or go one of these corporations or something. Lobbyists, they always land on their feet. So no, I don't see a silver lining in this thing around here. I don't know, Miss Simmons, what do you think? You're on the north side, right?
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, she sent me these different proposals and stuff. So, is it destined to become just another desert, Miss Sims, or is there really going to be some uh, changes made that are beneficial to the neighborhood?
Well, in regards to the last couple years, as I retired from a paying job, et cetera, I kind of stepped back from a lot of the community things that I was involved in, et cetera, et cetera. But here recently in watching to see what's going on, uh, was the light rail, the city council, et cetera, et cetera. I myself, as I said, because I think our generation, James, like I've said before, haven't passed down things the good, the bad, and the ugly, I'm kind of starting to get back into the political things or the things that I was involved in. One of the things that, as Robert was talking, it reminded me, and he was talking about what I heard him say was describing how the system is made and set up to not let people succeed, et cetera, et cetera. And that reminded me a while back that I figured out how the casinos worked. Because in the 90s, one of my girlfriends, my children were still in high school. She and her daughter were going to go up to one of the casinos here. The daughter couldn't go, so she and I went. And I didn't enjoy myself a whole lot. And she had whatever it was, she had some, whatever it is that I had money to spend, not at the casino. But I had figured out before then, casinos are set up not to let you win money because they can't afford to let people win too much, as they would go out of business. So I only spent about $10 or maybe $100 what I had. Then I gave my friend back because I just couldn't get into knowing that people were going to rip me off legally. So I didn't spend the money. I gave it back to her. And I agree with Robert in regards to we can be taught, and the studies that have been shown, we not only as Black folk, but anybody can be taught to not like themselves. And I think maybe Bill would know, and some of you all would know about the first doll series where they gave children dolls that looked like them, and the Black children couldn't relate to it. They felt they chose the white dolls over the Black dolls. And then I learned way back when during Martin Luther King's time, Jane Elliott, when King was killed, and she's a white teacher with a white students to teach them how to about racism and stuff. And so she set up well, she said it was an experiment, but she divided the group of children, 8th graders, into blue eyes and brown eyes. And she told them, one day the blue eyes were superior, et cetera, and the brown eyes weren't. And so the children, just within that quick amount of time, they started at each other in regards to negative, because you're brown eyes, you're dumb, or this and that. And then the next day she reversed it. The brown eyes were the superior ones, and the blue eyes thought they were better than whatever. They didn't. They were couldn't get good grades, and so that taught me that the power of listening to people who you trust and don't realize have the power of controlling you in regards to how you self-identify with yourself. The self-fulfilling prophecy in regards teaching you to not like yourself or your culture and things. And I can even do that. It's easy to learn. I could even do that. Only 2 things need to be in place: that you trust what I say, and you're going to do
it. They're leading us into a trap. Exactly. When you look at the legalizing marijuana, okay. Well, you go to a job and they give you a drug test. Oh, okay. So now how is that going to work? How is that going to work?
I can tell you exactly how it works because Vaughn did it to me, and what they had to do was pay me unemployment for almost 4 years because they hired me detrimental to their policy. So they violated their policy, and just like those auditors, I made their ass pay. So if you know what you're doing, but see, first of all, with my mentality, I have a problem with someone equating my mentality as a man to a child and be able to separate me by eyes or by. I mean, as black people, we went through this with the light skin, dark skin period. I mean, come
Yeah.
on now, we've been through this for years. So I'm not so much buying into that. But Brother Williams, speaking from uh, a party, whether it be the Black Party or any other, an organizational level, why don't we homestead our neighborhoods and keep that property for ourselves?
Yes, there it is. So, what I was just saying previously about having the ability to have real institutional control because the community provides at least 50% of all the command and control apparatus. If you were to do that, even though it wouldn't fix everything, because, as I said before, once you've built something a certain way, it may take the same amount of time or longer to dismantle that same thing. So the things I'm proposing are things that I think could actually happen. Not the thing that I think they actually should do, but the things I think they might do, or at least might consider. But we still, like I said, to this point, are left with this very large, very large chasm, a break between the two, between those that are policed and those who do the policing. They're every once you see a cool viral video of a guy doing like a little dance party with the kids, in the area that is being produced, being policed, or guy, shocking the kids about how good he is at basketball or whatever, that kind of thing. You like right, that kind of thing. It's little feel good things, but none of them are they're all situational. None of them are systemic. So we have to create a systemic and thorough, breaking apart of the way things are done. And then the foundation for the new, whatever you want to call it, new whatever, is on, like I said, community control, changing entirely the way people are promoted, the way people are advanced in the terms of their careers, and providing, as I said, a a budget that is primarily focused on reducing lethality by, like I said, making sure that there's rewards for everyone who manages to, in a non-lethal fashion, go about doing the job. Uh, the the fact that somebody said something about how, I mean, you could almost recycle the headlines. Unfortunately, you change the name, change the location, and maybe the manner of death, right? But you can run the same story
Yeah.
for the past few years.
Death by blue. It doesn't matter whether It doesn't matter whether they shot him or they beat him to death or the man died in shock after having dogs sicked on him. I mean, you know,
Right.
it's kind of like I was asking Mr. Scott earlier. It doesn't matter whether or not George Floyd was not from Minneapolis. The fact is that he was killed by police,
Correct.
regardless of what city or where he was from. The fact is, as a black man, he was killed by the police. Period.
Correct. Yep.
Uh, uh, Brother Williams, what do you think about like I said, as any organization or part of an organization or even individuals within the black community starting to homestead some of those buildings and properties that have been laid abandoned for so long?
I think that goes back into what I was stating earlier, though, about the what has happened when you create a concept of codependency. Because in order to do that, now what you're talking about is that we have to operate on a level of self-sufficiency and deal with having collective cooperation to where we are able to be willing, capable, and ready to take and maximize that and utilize it for our own and through our own level of empowerment. See, what you're talking about goes kind of right back to what we were saying about aspects of the Black Panther Party back in the 60s. But as a result, see, the difference between now and then is the fact that we were dealing with environments to where, because of segregation, we basically only had us anyway to depend on. So that through that isolation of so racism was intact to was so out in your face to where the segregation made it so to where our ability to roam and be individuals was not as what it is today. So because we can operate in free roam as individuals, we don't have a collective identity. And that goes into the concept of assimilation. Through assimilation, we don't have a collective identity as Black people. So when you talk about trying to create that, which goes into intercommunalism, when you talk about trying to create that environment, then the majority of our people look at you cross-eyed because you damn near talking about separatism. And then when you talk about separatism, now they're gonna put you on a vengeful list of being radical, and then they're gonna call you a hate group simply because what you recognize you need to do is to put yourself in a position to where you are in control of your environment, which is what we call self-determination, which is what we call community empowerment in the first place. So what you're talking about is reintroducing the concept of the dollar circulating within the Black community, and that Black community being able to thrive off of its own sustainability. That right there is basically revolutionary in modern times, because the reason why reform tends to be the main approach is because at that point what you're talking about is what type of power would it take to erect a replacement public safety infrastructure, and what type of power would it take to dismantle the justice system and erect our own. See that in order to do that, again, you're talking about high degrees of self-sufficiency, and you're talking about organization that needs to be in place in order to redo what societal needs that we need. And dealing with a theory of addressing intercommunalism is not going to work, because we have to have a practice on that's in use on a large scale before we tear down the current institutions. You can't tear something down and then call yourself being able to build it back up, because we're not in a position to be able to do that. So how do you create a parallel environment that has the ability to be able to develop and work its way to that? And the reason why I threw that out there is because, keep in mind, what we're failing to realize is that we are at war, and they continually create a situation to where when we attempt to try to elevate our communities, something is going to just sneak in there and snatch you back down. So the things that I'm talking about are oftentimes are always put into place, and then something comes along to try to dismantle that before it makes enough headway to be able to replace the system of oppression that is in place. That's why I say you have to know that you are at war. And so, therefore, you have to strategically go about building up a situation to where you can deal with levels of self sufficiency. But that takes a population of people that recognize they need to do what we call the 3Ds within the Panther Party: define who we are, develop who we are, and then be able to defend who we are. And when I say defend it, that's that entire infrastructure that is able to be defined and then developed. I'm not talking about, uh, necessarily physical combat. I'm talking about an infrastructure that has to be able to defend its ability to survive, thrive, and flourish on whatever level. And so, as long as we don't recognize that, then we don't oftentimes see how they come in and they gentrify a community as that community is doing what it does. They redistrict the community to prevent us from being able to concentrate our voting power and deal with things in a way to where we can make a difference through certain forms of electoral politics. There's all these different tricks in the book that they keep using against us, and all because we keep operating like individuals as opposed to having a collective recognition of what we need to do, which is why, again, one of the things that the Panthers always say was all power to the people. The people don't recognize that in dealing with the aims and of COINTELPRO. This is why the ideal was to prevent the black nationalist movements from being able to gain credibility because they were preaching and teaching self-determination. The Black Panther Party became public enemy number one, not when it had the guns, but when it was politicizing the children and feeding the children and creating an environment to where we were operating and practicing self-sufficiency. That is what made the Black Panther Party public enemy number one and had to be dismantled. Remember that.
Well, hey, great discussion tonight. Bill, I'm going to put you in the old stereotype. First hired, first fired. So give us your final thoughts for the evening.
Yeah. So as we mentioned quite some time ago, we are right on the, the precipice, the doorway to Black History Month. And every Black History Month, I do a whole tweet series on Twitter that I call Black Football History Month. And while tonight, we have focused on this, and rightly focused on this very serious and very, resilient problem, there are things that have happened that we can point to. There have been some successes, minor ones, for the most part. There's things we can point to. So the reason I don't throw in the towel or give up or say, like, this isn't worth it, is I know it is. And I know we can win. And it will take a lot of us. And it will take a long time. And it will take creativity. And it will take being able to make it up as you go along sometimes when certain things happen. But I do believe strongly in the future. And I do believe strongly in us. And because of people like the people here, because of people like Miss Sims, because of people like Mr. Scott, because of Brother Williams and the young people, right? Because we always sort of cry about how they don't care anymore and they aren't very bright. They don't read books and all the other things we complain about, whine about. And some of those things have basis in fact. So, but all of those things are fixable, and it has to come from us, right? We have to extend downward our hand, our knowledge and everything to bring the young people up, because no matter what kind of acting out you may see from them, all of that is different ways of them asking to be fed, right? Mentally, emotionally, sometimes physically, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Unless we are able to do that, that victory I'm talking about will not be won. I thank you all so much for being here tonight, and it's a pleasure to see you all again.
Mr. Scott, your final thoughts for the evening.
Oh, as Bill said, Black History Month, and with my nonprofit and the books we do, I'm busy this month, but I'm also busy throughout the year. We're going to continue to do different programs, different trainings, different things to show a positive side and hopefully inspire, our people. And I really want to focus on our people because I think our movement has been so diluted. It's been so everybody now. This is all inclusive. This is all diverse. This is we still have our own issues to really deal with. And I think of the laws. I just think of watching this legal program with my dad. And we were watching the program, and it was a court drama. And it was a question by the lawyer, and then somebody in the audience jumped up and said, "He's lying. That's not what happened. That's not what happened." And the judge says, "Strike that from the record. Just strike that." And my dad said, "You can strike anything from the record, but you can't strike it from the mind." And so I think as long as we continue to realize everything we see, everything we hear, we still should have our own focus to move ahead. And I too, like Bill, I enjoy talking with you folks, and I think it's an inspirational thing for us to get together. I mean, I think there's so many things I see with Dad's books, and I review these things. There were so many social organizations, so many groups of people that they, as Brother War said, we had to do these things on our own, and we made the best of it then. And now the way things are, as he said, the individualism, somehow we have to regroup. And I think if we look back to what we've done and what we can do and get inspired by that, I think we can move ahead. So I hope to talk with you folks soon.
I'm going to kind of inject in here and give my final thoughts because I'm going to let Brother Williams go next, and Miss Sims is going to kind of put us to bed here. But I had said at the beginning of the year that I was hoping that we could change subjects and talk about positive things, or at least things that are, like the elections, what's going on as far as our voting rights and things like that. But when I look at this video, I'm not sure if a lot of you remember it, but I recall the commercial of the old Indian watching his land being polluted.
Right.
And he sheds that one single tear.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at our communities and the way that we have been treated down through the years, and that's me shedding that one single tear. Brother Williams.
Well, I do want to take one word that you said and go into how that word is used to basically disarm the population, and that's keep hope alive. These words are chosen specifically because hope inspires seeing a different result minus the reality of change. It fuels us to continue looking for a better process of coping. And with that, revolution is the only solution. So I challenge the listeners to visualize what that looks like, figure out what that feels like in order to understand how to act like revolution. Because we have to be willing, capable, and ready, all three things together, to make the necessary change and have the necessary appetite to want a better way of life. And that way of life is not going to come by waiting on others to free you. You must be willing, capable, and ready to free yourself. And
free your
so,
mind, and your ass will follow.
Will follow. That's why I said, what does it look like? What does it feel like in order to be to act like? But we can't do that if we only keep hope alive.
Hope is a weapon. I think we did a program about. I think we did a show on that. Miss Sims, take us home.
First, one thing when Robert was talking in terms of Black folk needing to get back to doing things as a collective of Black folk for our survival or endurance into the future. It kind of reminded me that I think the last time we did that, I thought of Black Wall Street, where the system wouldn't allow that. They even bombed us. I mean, you really use bombs to kill us and stuff. Okay, my final words was, and I was going to propose this to you, James, that Black History Month, one of the things when I was more involved with young folk, one of the things in terms of history, they had learned about past history, people already written in the books and things like that. What they were wanting to know more of what the history now, what's going on. And so one of the things I was going to propose, James, for us as a panel is to one of the sessions for us to bring forth people in our community that we know that are making history now. Like I think of Mr. Scott and his Scott collection, Robert in what he's doing, the Black Panthers. And at one point I looked at the Dr. Casey's grandmother, some of the things they did. And I thought of Bill. I know he's involved with a lot of campuses and maybe football and stuff. And one of the things that I thought of as I watch YouTube and a lot of the football stuff that's in the news, whether it's Deion Sanders or the man
Ed
connected
Reed.
with Ed Reed and things like that. And it reminded me of going back into the 1970, 72, the young men from Syracuse University that boycotted at Syracuse University, and a lot of the scholarships were taken. At that time, only two black players were allowed on the field at one time. So those are, to me, those are history makers that a lot of people don't know and realize that have happened. And just coincidentally, within the last few days, one of my contacts sent to me a list of black business owners and many in the Twin Cities and black in the Twin Cities, black leaders. And none of the people that came to my mind in naming current leaders, people that are making history, was on that list. And so that's one of the things I would like for us to do, Mr. King, one of our Mondays, for each of us to come forth with some people in our communities or people we know that are making history right now that others around us don't know about, but should know about, and for us to start letting people know some positive things that are going on.
Hey, I would love to do that, and good luck with you trying to find some that's willing to put their faces on the air. Mr. Scott can tell you about the numerous invitations that they have probably sent out to different people and organizations on Our Black Voices, and how many responses that they got back. But
two black quarterbacks first. Two black quarterbacks start the Super Bowl and put your money on Patrick. I'm Mahomes. I'm just saying.
Hey, great show tonight. I look forward to talking with everyone. We invited Mr. Scott to talk on that Ed Reed situation, but that must have been one of those emails that he didn't get. But I would have loved to have his thoughts on that and the HBCUs. I've been trying to get Mr. Scott to get some of those people that he knows from back in the days when he was in college on the show. So, you know, a lot of people, you know, when it comes time to put their face out here on, you know, in public, kind of shy away from it. But
they may not want to show their faces, but we can still name them and talk about them.
Put an emoji there. You don't have to show your real face. You can put an emoji there. You know, put a big question mark up there. I don't care what you look like. I just want your presence and your thoughts. You know. But hey, great show tonight. Enjoy talking to everyone, and look forward to talking to everybody next week. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Good night. Peace and love to you all.
As Brother David says, all power to the people.
Amen. Amen. Bye-bye.
Yeah. You all right Wednesday, Bill? Or you'll let us know?
I should be. I have only one other thing in the evening. It should wrap up.